Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine 18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. This is my first recap video of 2024, looking back at the month of January. This may be a long one, so I will timestamp in the description box below so you can skip ahead to the sections that might interest you most. I will be sharing just some general life updates, the decks I've purchased or received this month, decks that I've worked with the most this month, the books I've read, of which there are 16, other book-related updates, just a couple of things about looking ahead in terms of book-related content and some things that I'm going to be reading, a check-in with my deck exploration or deck wish list, and maybe a little bit about some forthcoming tarot and divination related content ideas here on my channel. So, general life updates for January. January was actually pretty um, uneventful in ways that I am grateful for. I find December to be quite a stressful month for a whole host of reasons. So I'm glad that January was pretty quiet, pretty calm, just kind of day to day, exactly what I would have, expected, just kind of going to work, coming home, nothing particularly disruptive in the month of January, which I am very thankful for. One of the highlights of January for me was doing a class with Kelly Fitzgerald of The Truth and Story, the reading skills class. So this was 4 weeks looking at card reading skills in a way that was designed to be not system specific. So the class was really designed to be useful whether you read tarot or oracle or Kipper or Lenormand and so on. So we spent a lot of time talking about how we think of our reading styles, our approaches to reading, our thinking about different kinds of reading philosophies, types of questions that we like to answer, how we work with spreads, considerations in designing spreads, all these kind of wide-ranging topics that are really interesting points of conversation. I found the class really thought-provoking for me. I'm looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts here and there in different videos going forward. It was very helpful for me to think about and really kind of, write down and journal about and perform divinatory readings about my own approach to reading, what kinds of questions I do and don't like to ask tarot, for example, how, if at all, I like to use spreads, how I might like to combine different decks in readings, which is something I'm interested in playing around more with, combining tarot and oracle, for example, or designing particular spreads for particular decks. Lots of ideas that have been percolating as a result of this class. So I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad that when you take a class with Kelly, you get the recordings of the class so I can watch them again at a later date. Really, really good. For my animal for the month of January, I'm back to having an animal of the month. I chose capybara. And most of the time, I'm having my animal of the month through Tegan over at Cosmic Creepers Animal Gnosis on her Patreon. But she took a break in January, so I decided to pick an animal for myself, and I very deliberately chose capybara. This was not a random draw. I think capybaras are fucking amazing, and I think I might aspire to, you know, being a little bit more capybara in my life. They're social, they, you know, they're playful, they make friends, not just with each other, but with birds and other kinds of animals that are around as well. They are really fun to me. I love watching capybara videos. So I was happy to spend some time with capybara. I created a capybara spread for myself. I watched some capybara documentary content. I just had a great time. So here's my capybara, and this is from the 100 Ink Animals Oracle deck. So on to decks that I have received or purchased this month. 0. I have nothing to show here. I didn't purchase any decks, I didn't pre-order any decks, and I didn't receive any decks that I had already paid for previously. Nothing new at all. I will say that part of this, I think, is because I am waiting on a few that I backed on Kickstarter last year. So the Inkwitch Tarot and the Game Marseille, I'm waiting for and looking forward to. And I think having some decks that I'm looking forward to receiving fairly soon. I think they've gone through the backer kit process. You know, they're going to be shipping very soon if they're not shipping already. So the fact that I have these coming fairly soon kind of makes me less inclined to go deck shopping. I find I do have a wish list, which I'll share. And my birthday is coming up. My birthday is March 5th. So I suspect when I do my monthly recap for February, there will be some birthday treats on there. So January, I bought nothing. I did rehome several decks, but I did not get anything new in January. Decks that I have worked with the most in January are several. So I am interested in working more with Marseille. As I've mentioned, I've got a few Marseille books on my to read list for this year. And so during Kelly's class on reading skills, I decided to work with a Marseille deck for any readings that I was doing in the context of that class. And so I worked with the Diverse Tarot de Marseille. This is a make playing cards deck that is available now. It is one that my friend gifted to me very kindly that I love. I love the colors. And I really want to get more in the habit of picking up a Marseille deck when I'm doing smaller readings, like daily draws or moon phase reading, things like that. I tend to gravitate more to Marseille for a larger reading, like a 9-card spread, for example. But there's no reason not to choose Marseille for any size of spread or reading, so I've been enjoying playing around with this one. I have also been spending quite a bit of time with Le Tarot des Paysages Intérieurs, the Tarot of Inner Landscapes. This is a French tarot deck, and I'm working on a video about this deck. This deck is an interesting one. It's very abstract. I've already partially filmed what is intended to be a deep dive of this deck. This deck has prompted a lot of reflections in the context of Kelly's reading skills class and the style of reader I am. So some of that deep dive about this deck, I think, is really going to turn out to be more of a deep dive into how I approach reading tarot and how I approach reading abstract tarot decks, like this one. So that's been interesting. I am enjoying working with this. It's very wintry, so I've been using that a lot. As a pair to go with that, when I put it with anything, I've been working with the Endless Oracle, and this is by the same creator as the Inkwitch Tarot, which I'm waiting for. And I really love this Oracle deck. I feel like this should be a deep dive deck for me to make a video about at some point, because I think that this is one of the best Oracle decks to come out in the last several years, in my opinion. It reads really well on its own. You can do a 9-card reading with this all on its own, no problem, in my opinion. It also gets along well with other decks. I just think it's really well done. So I've been really enjoying this. And this is also, it feels like a wintry one to me too. So I've been enjoying working with that. And I don't have it with me, but I've been working with Naturescapes as well. Every lunar cycle, I choose a deck to do a reading with on every phase of the lunar cycle. So new moon, crescent moon, first quarter, and so on. I have a small reading that I will do for each of those. And right now it's the Naturescapes Tarot. So it's upstairs on my table still, with the cards face up from the last reading that I did. So that's what I've been working with. Books that I have read in January. I mentioned that I've read 16 books. I am not going to go through all 16 books in tremendous detail here, but I'll share a little bit about each of them. I will also share from the outset that the reason that that number is so high is because 6 of those titles are standalone short stories. So 6 of the books that I read this month were 40 pages in length each or so. The rest are a range of different themes, genres, and lengths. So I'll start with the short stories. I read a series of standalone short stories called The Far Reaches, and this is for Kindle. So I'm not sure about the availability of these if you do not have a Kindle, but they are stories that you can get kind of for free electronically if you do, and you can borrow them and then have them on your Kindle temporarily and give them back. So I read all 6 in The Far Reaches, which include Void by Veronica Roth, Just Out of Jupiter's Reach by Nnedi Okorafor, The Long Game by Ann Leckie, Falling Bodies by Rebecca Roanhorse, How It Unfolds by James S.A. Corey, and Slow Time Between the Stars by John Scalzi. And all of these deal with quite kind of far from Earth science fictional settings, we could say, as a uniting theme. My favorite one, actually, and I didn't necessarily expect this just based on experience, but my favorite one was Slow Time Between the Stars by John Scalzi, which had a sentient spaceship as the narrator, first person protagonist. John Scalzi, I have enjoyed historically in the context of sci-fi that's kind of more comedic. It's not what I usually go for, but he wrote Red Shirts, which is related to Star Trek, so of course I like it. But this was wonderful. I really liked this short story a lot. I also really liked How It Unfolds by James S.A. Corey, which is actually 2 people who write together under the single pen name. I had never read James S.A. Corey before, but they are the authors who wrote the books that are the basis of the Expanse television series. And I loved watching The Expanse. I thought it was fantastic. I would watch it again. I haven't read The Expanse books though. I don't tend to read books after I've already seen a television or film adaptation of them. But based on this short story, I do plan to read James S.A. Corey's new series, the first book of which is coming out this year. So I had mixed feelings about the Far Reaches series overall. I definitely liked some short stories way more than others, but even just for those 2, I'm happy to have read the whole collection. I read 2 books by Palestinian authors. The first was a fiction, which is called Wondrous Journeys in Strange Lands by Sonia Niemer. And this was a recommendation from Katie Flowers, who had read this book previously. And it reads really like a fable, a kind of travel story fable. And I really, really enjoyed this a lot. I also read Light in Gaza, which is a nonfiction collection by Palestinian authors specifically about Gaza and focused on Gaza. And Light in Gaza is an interesting anthology in that it is very internally diverse in terms of the kind of formats that are represented. So there is some poetry there. There are also kind of academic essays. There are historical accounts. There are autobiographical, kind of first person memoir accounts of life and experience in Gaza. Needless to say, it was a very emotional read. One of the first contributors featured in the collection has been murdered since the time that the collection was published. And, sitting with that was difficult. I would recommend checking this collection out. It is a tough read. But for the time being, Haymarket Books is making the collection Light in Gaza free. And I've mentioned this previously, but I'll link below to Haymarket Books, where you can get the electronic copy of this and several other Palestine-related titles free of charge in a couple of different electronic formats. So read those. I read Making Love with the Land by Joshua Whitehead. This is a collection by an Indigenous author who I have read before, but who I've read before his fiction. I have never read any, um, we'll say, nonfiction of of Whitehead's before. I really, really enjoyed this. Very challenging, sets of ideas, very thought-provoking for me, this collection. It focused a lot on writing and language and indigenous languages and genre and writing in different genres from indigenous perspective. And it also discussed in some of the pieces Joshua Whitehead's work writing his novel Johnny Appleseed, which I have yet to read, but which is on my list. I got a couple of, not spoilers, but spoiler makes it sound like it was spoiled, not at all. But definitely some more insight into Johnny Appleseed without having read it yet, which was interesting. Really, really brilliant. Really, really, really brilliant book. This was a one that was on my holiday book list that I got from my family, and I'm very glad to have this on my shelf. I know that I will revisit this. I read Year in the Wildwood. This one, this is a bit of a cheat to say I read this in January because obviously it took a year. I followed the year plan to read this through as the book describes and intends. I've already made a video about the 3 Wildwood Tarot books, so you can check that video out for more of what I thought about this. I will leave it there for the sake of length. I read Womb City by Tlotlo Tsamasi, and this is a science fiction dystopian novel. The author is from Botswana, and I have read Tsamasi before in short fiction. And this is the first long fiction, I think. It's a long, so it's not a debut, but it's a long fiction debut, novel debut. Uh, and Womb City is really intense. It definitely, the dystopian aspects of the society in the book have a lot to do with reproduction and reproductive politics and surveillance and control. And I thought that this was really, really well done. I was initially concerned that like it might be content warning heavy in a way that would make it difficult for me to engage with, but I really enjoyed this novel a lot. It was very fast paced. It felt like a combination of genres, I think. Really, really, really interesting. I would 100% read more from this author. I really liked this. It was a good start to my month in terms of fiction. This was the first novel that I finished. I read The Butcher of the Forest by Primi Mohammed, who I have read before. The Butcher of the Forest is a tale of a mysterious forest wherein people disappear who go into the forest, and it follows the only person who's ever gone in the forest and come out. And she is tasked by a tyrannical king to go into the forest again to bring out his children who have entered the forest and are, running out of time. And this was very atmospheric. There's a little bit of kind of new weird in aspects of the writing. Definitely a high degree of body horror in this one. This one did something that I really don't like in terms of, spoiler alert, I guess, the ways that experiences of sexual assault are represented in books. So that really tanked the book for me in a lot of ways. Like there are not a ton of things necessarily that an otherwise a book that I would otherwise have tons positive to say about it can really like bring it down for me. And this is one of those. For me personally, definitely not, that all readers are going to feel this way, but I was unhappy with this. We'll say my written reviews, I link to them on Goodreads and Storygraph below. I have more detail there. I read World Running Down by Al Hess. This is a bit of a story. This is a bit of a story. World Running Down. This is a somewhat dystopian, near future book set in Utah. It's a bit Mad Maxy, I think, in some of its style for sure. It involves artificial intelligence and androids, and the protagonist is a trans character. The author is trans as well. And this book came about because my dear friend and coworker, told her friend, who I had never met before, that I, her coworker, wanted to start a queer sci-fi book club. Would she be interested in participating? Yes, sure. And so I had a book club organized at my home. Not by me. I had fun. I'm glad that it played out this way, and we're going to keep reading together, I think. But this book I thought was okay. I appreciated a number of things in terms of representation, particularly around trans joy and romance and connection. Like those things I really liked. It almost skewed a bit YA in tone for me, which is not my thing. There were aspects of the writing that were not quite what I look for. But this is a book that is really well loved. So if a book, about androids appeals to you with lots of good own voices trans representation, then I would say check out World Running Down by Al Hess. I read Power to Yield and Other Stories by Bogi Takach. I have read one of these stories before in this collection, and this was an advanced copy that I got from NetGalley. Thank you. I read one of the stories in Power to Yield before in another collection called Xenocultivars, and I really liked it. It was one of my favorite stories in the bunch. So when this collection came up, I was very happy to get a copy of it. This is really excellent. Really, really excellent. If you're into science fictional short fiction with a liberatory politic, a very distinctively queer and trans liberatory politic, I would say The Power to Yield and Other Stories, absolutely recommend. I think that it was excellent. I loved so many of the stories there. I just recently finished The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw, who I've read before. They are a Malaysian author who has written a number of novellas, as well as I think at least one novel. The Salt Grows Heavy is a novella. It follows a mermaid, and it has references to and resonances with The Little Mermaid, but the resonances are few and far between because in this story, the mermaids are not what you expect. This is a very weird one. It follows a cannibal mermaid and a plague doctor through a strange landscape, we shall say. I thought this was wonderful. I think Cassandra Khaw is such a good author. I really like just the way that they work with words. So good. Um, it's scary. This is a definite horror. And if scary mermaids are your thing, I say check it out. I will say that The Salt Grows Heavy is very heavy on the body horror, very heavy on gore. Cannibalism is on page and described fairly intricately. Uh, it is a bit unusual to talk about an author being a really beautiful, intricate writer with this being the subject matter, but there it is. It is not for the faint of heart. If gore bothers you, then I would say like steer really clear of this one. Otherwise, I say it's great. And finally, the last book that I read, um, not last chronologically, but last in this conversation, which I loved, is He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. This is a sequel to She Who Became the Sun, which I believe came out in 2022. She Who Became the Sun was one of my absolute favorite, if not my for sure favorite, novel in the year that it came out that I had read. It is marketed as fantasy. I found the first book to be 98% historical fiction and 2% fantasy. This one definitely leans into the fantastical aspects more. It is still very much historically based. It is set in the mid 1300s in China, and it is epic, historic fiction, fantasy. It is totally queer. It is amazing. This is what I want. This is what I want in the fiction that I read. If you've read this series, both of them, and you can think of other things that are like this, please recommend them to me in the comments, because for kind of whether historical fiction or fantasy fiction that is epic and that is queer, like this is what I want. 5 stars. I love this. This one I will say, if you've read the first one and not this one yet, this one has a much heavier tone than the first one. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's gory or heavy on the body horror in the way that something like Cassandra Claus novella was, but it's definitely, there's a lot of violence. It's not mostly graphic or on page, but there's also very little respite from it. It is heavy and intense, and there's a lot of manipulation and a lot of people doing horrible things to people throughout. It is not an easy read in that sense, but this is so good. This this might be one of my favorite series of all time. And it's a duology. This is it. I cannot wait to see what Shelley Parker Chan does next, because I think that they're brilliant. I think this is brilliant. I can't say enough good things about this. I don't think it's going to be the book for everyone. I don't think the first book is a book for everyone either, but this is what I want in fiction, please. More of this. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with this book. Okay. That's the 16 books I've read. I want to share some statistics just at the end, because now I have a uh what is this called? Google Sheets that generates these fun statistics that I can share with you. I'll link below where to find these spreadsheets. You can get them on Etsy. So of the 16 books I read, the page count total is 2,863. So not as high as you would expect given that there's 16 books, but that's because so many were standalone shorts. I read 2 essay collections, 4 novels, 2 novellas, and 7 short story, either a collection or a standalone short story. Of the 16 authors that I read this month, 6 were new to me authors, and 10 were authors that I had read before. 7 books that I read of the 16 are part of a series or collection in some way. 9 are completely standalone. All of the books that I read were published in 2020 or later. So this was a very contemporary reading month for me, and I would say that that's not unusual at this point. I've been reading a lot of new release, particularly with the fiction lately, so that's interesting. My average rating was 3.7. I had some 5-star reads this month for sure. I would like to see the 3.7 be higher though. I'm hopeful that February will be higher than 3.7. I'm filming this on February 3rd, and I'm off to a good start, I will say. So, fingers crossed. Some other book-related updates or news or musings or thoughts that are not the books that I read this month. I had set a goal this year for doing 3 readathons. I'm doing Blackathon right now. I'm doing Asian Readathon later this year, which I've done several times before, and I was looking for a third, and I found my third, thanks in part to Mariana Moss Books, who also makes tarot videos. We know Mariana. Um, I am going to participate in Historathon. And Historathon is a year-long readathon where the month is divided into 4 quarters, and each of those quarters is designated a time period, and they're chronological. So the January, February, March quarter is prehistory up to 500 CE. So the idea is to read nonfiction history, at least one book per each of these 4 time periods, and, you know, follow along with the monthly structure if you want, kind of thing. So I've picked a book for March that I'm going to read that falls into the prehistory to 500 CE specification that I thought might be of interest to some folks here. I'll share my March TBR towards the end of February, but I'll just share this now in case it's of interest. I've decided to read Divination and Human Nature, A Cognitive History of Intuition in Classical Antiquity by Peter T. Struck. This is an examination of how several ancient philosophers and ancient schools of philosophy viewed divination and future casting of various sorts. So think, Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, etc. So I do have a background in philosophy. I'm excited to dive into this. Ancient philosophy is not has never been my area of focus. I've read a fair amount of Plato, though, by necessity, doing a philosophy minor in undergrad. So I'm excited to revisit this again. So if you want to read Divination and Human Nature with me and maybe have a chat at some point about divination in the ancient world, at least I think in ancient, kind of Greek context specifically, let me know because I'll be reading that in March. So that's exciting. Deck wish list / to explore list. I have a list. As I mentioned, I haven't bought anything this month. I have a list of oracles. I have a list of all oracle at this point, and not a single tarot on the to explore / wish list. So, my current list includes the Aquarius Rising Oracle by Charlie Claire Burgess, which is forthcoming. It's playing card based. It is not available yet. The Inner Eye Oracle by Stephen Bright, which is playing card based oracle. It's mass market. I'm going to take Kelly Fitzgerald's playing cards class later this year. It feels like time. Playing cards is something that I have ancestral connection to. It's not something that I've dedicated any intensive study to, knowing that it would be a big project for me if I did. But these decks keep presenting themselves to me and are pulling me in some sort of way. So I've got those there. 2 Oracle decks created by 9coins, Tishan of 9coins here on YouTube. The 9coins Oracle and Oracle of Simple Space. These are make playing card decks. These are going to be birthday present to myself, so I fully anticipate to be sharing those soon. I have the Sherwood Oracle on my list by John Matthews, Mark Ryan, and Yvonne Gilbert. Forthcoming. This is very much a to explore. There's nothing really visible other than the box design at this point. It will be mass market. I might be really into it or I might not. We shall see, but it's on the list for now. The Citadel Oracle. It's fantasy themed. I'm a fantasy reader. It's on the list. I don't know what that is going to become of that, but it's there. The Minimalist Oracle. This is a Mariana Moss Books favorite. I really like the Minimalist Oracle, so that's sitting on the list to look into more. And the Inner Ecology Oracle. The Inner Ecology Oracle I had never heard of until very recently. It is a deck that funded on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is over. And as far as I know, it has been fulfilled because I started seeing walkthroughs of it. So I'm going to look into that one when it comes available because it is very much a kind of deck that speaks to me as a nature-based deck. So that is my list. The list of oracles. There you go. So I'll just close mentioning a little bit of forthcoming things that I'm thinking about on this channel. I'm really having fun with the top tarot trumps by Masha at Musings by Masha. I've been batch filming those, so I have a few already done and kind of queued up to release on the 2-week-ish interval that Masha intended. I'm really enjoying the VRs to this and seeing people's favorite majors. I have two deck videos, deep dive kind of videos, partially filmed. One is Le Tableau de Paysage Intérieur, which I mentioned earlier, and the other is Wildwood. So I filmed my Wildwood book reviews, but I'm going to make a Wildwood deck deep dive video. It's partly filmed. I've filmed a couple of kind of snippets that are going to get edited into something. So that's coming. I'm thinking about doing a Q&A and opening myself up to questions for a Q&A. I did this once before, but it was 3 years ago at this point, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I know my subscriber list has changed significantly in the last 3 years, so I think maybe another Q&A could be fun. And I'm definitely rolling around some ideas in my mind for the divination speculations, divination and philosophizing kind of playlist that I have. I want to make a video thinking about the idea of spiritual tools and what constitutes a spiritual tool and why that categorization is important. For some people, that includes tarot decks, and for some, it doesn't. And for some, I think it probably does sometimes and not others. I think that that's interesting. And I have thoughts. So I have that on the list. And I have some other ideas I'm playing with for divination speculations as well that I'm not going to share too much about just yet. I did finally get my hard copy of Tarot for the Hard Work by Maria Minnis, so I'm excited to read that. And I'm sure I'll have a video dedicated to that as well. So that's kind of where things are at. I am looking forward to a great February. I hope everyone is well. Thank you for sticking with me if you watched this far. Even if you just got this far by skipping ahead in the timestamps, thank you. I appreciate you. I will see you all again soon.